Super Saturday is here and we asked for it and it has arrived. Could this be the greatest weekend of Super Saturday Six Nations history? We'll have to wait and see. Of course, Ant and myself will be delving into it and giving our experiences and what needs to happen on Saturday and how's it all looking. Break it down for listeners.
Yeah, Len, so if we look at the three contenders, obviously we've got Ireland, we've got England and we've got France. Before this weekend's game, Ireland were top of the log. Unfortunately for them, losing to France has meant that they've slipped to third place now, behind France and behind England. So obviously Ireland now need a bonus point victory against Italy, and they need to hope that both England and France lose in their respective fixtures. So that's Ireland. England, they need to get a bonus point victory against Wales in Wales, and they have to hope that France lose to Scotland. And the only team that have it solely in their own hands is France. If France beat Scotland, they win the Six Nations. Simple as. And that's as good as my maths is going to get, mate. If you want to start talking about bonus points and flipping score difference and all of that, mate, I'm going to have to pull out the calculator. But that is how I understand it, and I'm pretty sure that's factually correct.
And let's talk about Ireland. Like, how disappointed will they be? Obviously, leading in round 4 and then heavily beaten at home, and the manner against France. Like, where do you think they're at this week?
Yeah, I think that they'll be really, really frustrated. I think that, you know, when we look at what they could have achieved this tournament, obviously being the first times in a row, to fall in the manner that they did, especially at home, I think will make them really disappointed. That being said, the championship isn't out of reach, so I guess they still could achieve it, but I think it's extremely unlikely, to be honest. But do you know what? I think it's weird. It's one of those where when you're actually well beaten at home like they were, sometimes you can't be too pissed off. You've just got to kind of take your L and move on, because it's like, well, they were definitely beaten by the better team, and it wasn't one of those where it was like, oh, you know, if we'd played better, this, that, and the other. I think that France on that day were too strong, and you know they had all kinds of stuff going on with James Lowe being injured before the game, Mac Hansen. Those are two key performers for them. Them missing out makes a big difference. So I don't know. I think that they will be frustrated and annoyed because of what they could have done, and because they could have kept it all in their own hands. But at the same time, I think that they were well beaten. So from that perspective, you actually can't be too annoyed. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that makes sense? That's just how I would feel as a player in that camp. Like, I know that when you come off the pitch and you're well beaten, you don't have that same level of frustration, because you're just like, well, you know, we got hammered.
I reckon, Ant, this week it is very much like, let's get our game back out on the field. That will be the chat that they'll be having. Let's finish the tournament the way that we want to. That will definitely be happening. Yeah. And I think there'll be a lot of chat around the acknowledgement of this team will never play together again. And what I mean by that is when you think of Cian Healy, you think of Conor Murray, you think of Peter O'Mahony, those conversations would definitely be happening. If I was in there, I'd be saying, boys, we owe it to ourselves to finish this tournament very, very strong. We owe it to these players to finish the way that we want to play and the way that we want to finish, and putting our game back out on there. I think they'll be keen to bounce back, and it's a last chance. They won't be thinking about the Lions, but there is an opportunity just to hammer home, because I reckon there's a few question marks put over some people's heads with what happened against the French. And I think that if you're there, I'm in that group, and I'm saying this group has never been together again. And it's not because of the retirements, because so many of them will probably go on a Lions tour. By the time they get back to the autumn, you just never know. You can never predict rugby. And I just think that is the chat that'll be going on. There will not be much focus about Italy, if I'm honest. I think that they're aware of how Italy play, but I think there'll be a very much internal look at ourselves and saying, right, boys, let's get our game out on the field. Let's play the way that we play, and let's make sure that we go out and put in a performance that we know we're capable of and we want to be proud of, and send off these lot the way that we'd like to do. And I think that's very much the chat. So it's maybe more of like you're going after emotion. You're going after sort of... not pride, but although it was slightly dented at the weekend, but they're still a fantastic team. But I do believe that it'll be that type of chat. Go to Italy, get the job done. Let's take care of what we can take care of. Let's do our game and put our game out there, because at times it wasn't there to see at the weekend. And let's send these boys off the way that we'd like to, because we didn't do that last week.
No, Len, you're absolutely bang on. I think, like you said, the gravitas and the importance that those three players have on that team, I think makes it a little bit more emotional than it otherwise would be. Now, theoretically, Len, England can actually win the Six Nations, even if France win. But they have to score 87 points, which I think, mate, as against their solid outfit like Wales, in Wales, like we've said, it's probably a little bit too much to ask. But it begs the question, should England have been more attacking from the start of the Six Nations, do you think?
I think the attack is always been the biggest growth for England and this team over the last 12 months, if not longer, to be honest with you, Ant. And I think the pressure came on this England team to get a win. And first and foremost, the most important thing and the biggest thing this team needed on the back of the autumn and those results was to get the win. Mm-hmm. Now, I think Steve Borthwick was probably under some pressure to get results, and therefore he went back to a style that he knows very well, a style that he is more comfortable coaching, which is a kick-heavy, pressure-style game. And it got the wins, and it's got the last three, But against Italy, you saw England play with more endeavour, more intent. Bags of intent, actually, and it was really pleasing to see. But it made sense. You're going to push the envelope a little bit more against Italy, and that mindset of attacking is going to be there. Dry day, perfect conditions. You should have enough to beat Italy, and they did. The other two games was just about getting the results, and they got them. Now, you can look and argue and say that France, didn't bring their best performance. They dropped the ball. You can say Finn miss kicks. But at the end of the day, England got those two wins, and that's the most important thing. I think what you want to see from England this weekend, of course, Anne, is can we see, I think they'll still kick the ball heavy, and we'll delve into that a little bit later, but you want to see some of the endeavour that we saw against Italy, like out there in a big pressured game against Wales, because I would go as far as to say if Wales played Italy now, under the new regime, under the new changes, I think they'd have enough to beat Italy. I do. Under the change they've made and what they look like now, I think if they were playing Italy now at the back end of this tournament, I think they'd win. So I want to see England still have like a bit more ambition, still play with that endeavour like we saw against Italy, do it in a game where it's not as easy to do it in a stadium where the pressure's on and all those attributes. So to answer your question, no, should they have tacked more? Well, yes and no. I can understand why they didn't, because winning was all about winning and getting the result, and you had to play the Steve Borthwick model and the way he likes to do things, and that was a high pressure, high kicking game. And as long as we see now the pressure's sort of off this England team, they've got 3 results, the endeavour that they showed against Italy, and they do it again this weekend, then I think if you looked at the end of the tournament, would you be happy with England coming and the way they went about it? You probably would, yeah. But I think the biggest growth for England is still going to be the attack, and I think that is going to be a conversation, and that we are having ahead of the summer tour, that we are having ahead of the autumn, that we're having probably throughout the autumn. Because it's something that this team under Steve, under Wiggy, you haven't seen them flourish in attack at all, really.
Yeah, no, look, I think from my perspective, the only thing I would say is that winning is what dictates rugby, more or less. When I say rugby, I mean winning is the ultimate prize for rugby players and management. So I think that when they reflect on saying, should we have attacked more? I think they will actually reflect back to the Ireland game and say, how could we have won that game? Because if you win that game, the rest of the Six Nations in terms of how you play doesn't matter because you won those games. So, yeah, I think your summary was absolutely bang on, Len. I think it's definitely an area England will try and get better, but whilst you're winning games, winning is the most important thing. 100%.
And the other thing, Ant, about England, I believe, is if we're there, Ant, right, we're not chasing bonus points. We're not chasing we need to win by 90, because it's just, you ain't going to beat Wales by 90. You ain't going to beat them by 87. Let's be realistic here. That is not happening.
Yeah.
The most important thing, once again, is just winning. England have to just get the win. Now, you can start thinking and dreaming about, I want to get a bonus point. Irrelevant. So if I'm in camp this week, if I'm preparing for this game, and we've both been there, mate, the only thing is winning. So if you get, a penalty in front, you're kicking the goal. You're kicking over. If the 4 tries come, magnificent, great. It's a bonus. That's what's bonus point. It genuinely is a bonus today. The most important thing this England team to do is to go to Wales and get a win. Now, whether that's 9-6, irrelevant. Like, would I like them to play with more rugby? Yeah, of course. Would I like a great game? Of course. But the most important thing is just going to Wales and winning. And then you have to sit back and see what the other game does. But if you go out and you're chasing points, you're chasing bonus points, I tell you now, you get unstuck. And then you don't even get to watch the last game because you've already blown it. So I expect England to go there and first and foremost is try and win the game. And if they do that, then I see that as job done. And then you have to sit back and see what happens with France, Scotland.
The motivation for England is clearly there. But a team which doesn't have the same motivation is obviously Scotland, who are, essentially a dead... I don't know if it's still called a dead rubber if the other team can still win, but they have nothing to play for in this tournament. How do you...
They've basically been invited to the French party, haven't they? And that's essentially like what it is. You're going to Paris, like everyone's expecting France to win. The stadium's going crazy. We were there in 2022 when France won the Grand Slam. We played them in that last game, and it was literally like a circus in terms of like there was lasers and shows and the crowd's going nuts and the band's playing. It was almost just like ready to have this huge party, and you were just part of it. You were just like part of the party. And Scotland go there with a free swing. Now, what I mean by that is, again, if you're in Scotland's dressing room, you're saying, boys, no one expects us to win. No one expects us to win. We don't need to like overthink it. We don't need to deal with pressure. The shackles are off. The way they play anyway, they're very much like they play free-flowing rugby. They push the envelope, they offload, they distribute, they try things. Finn Russell, obviously an absolute catalyst at this in terms of the way that he plays the game. So they're going there to France. And I think the thing is they've got to see, and the way that they've got to approach it is, we are not guests. We're not guests at this party. Like, we're not just turning up and being part of the big show. No, like, we are there. And if they're going to win it, we're going to make them win it like the hard way. And all the pressure's on them. And again, you just build that mentality and that mindset of like, we're going there, we're gonna go wide on them, we're gonna distribute, we're gonna move them. Like, they'll look at certain areas that they can target, and they'll back themselves to like the burden of pressure for France, this expectation. Now, we saw France a few times where the burden of expectation's been too much for them and they haven't been able to handle it. And Scotland have to try and get them into that type of game, and where time pressure, scoreboard pressure, and France looking at each other going, hang on, this isn't how it's supposed to be. Tonight was about, the French show, and we turn up and we play our rugby and the crowd's on their feet and everyone's part of this big, like crazy celebration, and we entertain, and then everyone goes nuts at the end of it. But if Scotland get their noses ahead, if they chip away at the score, if they get tries, and then all of a sudden France looking at the clock and the scoreboard's ticking down, the time's ticking down, the scoreboard, they're out of reach and everything like that, mate, you create this unbelievable pressure on this French team. And I think that's how Scotland have got to approach it. It's a free swing. All the pressure's on them, so let's create that pressure with the way that we play. And I think you go in, literally shackles off, like full of energy, full of enthusiasm, and go, right, we got nothing to lose here. Because if they haven't, they've got nothing to lose, but like everything to gain.
Yeah, I look at it and I think that there's 3 points to consider. I think one point is, and it's somewhat external for the players, but the management, I'm sure, will feel it, and that is the financial implications. For the longest, I never really understood that, you are paid a bonus based on where your team finishes. 2, I would say the Lions. Now, players obviously want to go on that tour, and whether they say it's at the front of their mind, the back of the mind, wherever it is, they're thinking about the Lions at this point because they can't win the championship. So players will be playing to get themselves on that plane. And I'm not saying they're going off on their own, trying to do madnesses, but they will be looking to impress for that very reason. And then the last point, I think, is points difference wise. If you're closer and it's all, 18, 16, 15, 13, whatever it is, if it's all nice and evenly contested, I think the championship looks totally different than if, there's 3 teams out in the lead and Scotland are in that no man's land. And so I think that definitely plays a factor, and it plays a factor in terms of, finishing the campaign with a win. And there's a feel-good thing that goes round camp, and it goes round, all the fans and stuff like that, and it flows. Whereas if you finish with a loss, a bad loss, for example, to France, and then the next time you're together with your full-strength team is the autumn, it's a long time to be getting hammered by the press, isn't it? So I don't know. I think that there's different pieces to where the pressure is coming on and why Scotland will want to impress in this game. But I think all of that adds into and fuels the fire of Scotland wanting to put on a good display. I'm sure the Scottish public want absolutely nothing to do with helping England win a Six Nations. But I'm not going to say no predictions, actually. After my Six Nations predictions, I'm leaving it out there, mate.
And from a French point of view, mate, I think the chat this week, if you're in there, and like I would be very much on the point of like, don't get ahead of ourselves. We've done a great win, but we've seen when we're not on it, what can happen, i.e. England and that performance there, where you're not at it and it becomes infectious and you drop the ball and you cough over and eventually it bites you in the arse. So if you're France, you're very much like, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Like, let's play our game. And like, let's make sure the occasion brings out the best in us. And that's the other thing is, you do all this to win championships. You do all this to perform, and you've got an opportunity to win the title on home soil in front of your home fans. Like, so let's make sure that we are realistic in terms of our standards and the way we approach the game, and we don't get ahead of ourselves. But then equally, let's make sure everything we're doing is building towards a fantastic performance to go out there and break the tape. And what I mean by that is like, break the tape, run through it. Let's not stumble to the finish line. Let's actually finish how we want to finish and go out there. And I think France, I see this game going a couple of ways. I either see France being really nervy, right, and being a little bit hesitant in the way that they do things, and Scotland just chucking the kitchen sink at them, and France being proper nervy and just about sort of holding on. Or I see France coming out and being like, right, this is ours. We're going for it, and our form's continuing. And Scotland just not being able to deal with that French power and the offloading and the wave of just big player and attack going. So I think if France get going and they rumble and they come out with that mindset of attacking the title rather than trying to sort of attack the title to win it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I know it sounds crazy, but you've got to have that mindset of, we're going to go win it. We're not going to like try and like not lose it. Like, it's not that mindset of, oh, we'll just try and not lose the title and, oh, we've just got to win. Like, no, like, we're going out to absolute dominate and like win it in, not in style, just go and win it in the way that we play rugby. So it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, our experience in 2015 was Super Saturday, and I think a lot of people reference Super Saturday, and when they think of it, it probably is that 2015, of course, where Wales played Italy and they ran a huge score. And I remember really clearly watching this. I remember being in my tracksuit, my anthem jacket, my bottoms, ready to leave for the stadium. Of course, we were playing at Twickenham that evening against France, and a load of us were watching it. I remember eating our pre-match meal. And I remember Wales like literally scoring, receiving another kickoff, scoring again, creating a mental points difference. They had to, right? And they absolutely nailed it. Game one. And you're like, right, well, they've set the standard and they've put the pressure. So at that point, the title was in their hands. I remember then like getting on the bus and leaving, and of course, Ireland were playing Scotland. And I remember being able to watch glimpses of that. Everyone's got their phones out, like watching it on their phone, and isn't it? Like no one's sort of saying anything. Of course, the weird thing is everyone's got sort of obviously different data streams. So some lads sort of 10 seconds ahead of others. So you could hear like a grunt or a moan or, oh, do you know what I mean? And then you know that obviously Ireland have scored, or because it all came down to points difference. And by the time you get to stadium, you're then trying to focus on what you need to do. And it's very much still like, right, we've got a job to do. But equally, you're fully aware. It's the only time in the championship or any international rugby where you're fully aware of what's going on before you or what's going on currently. And I remember like during the warm-up and stuff, I think it was on the big screen in the stadium. And like, you're just like fully aware of what's happening. And by the time we got into the sheds, and I don't know how well you remember it, mate, but I remember it being really clear that we needed to win by 30 odd points or whatever it was. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. But I remember being like, right, we've got to go out there and we've got to score tries and we've got to score points and we've got to win with a certain margin. And I remember us coming out. We'd had a great warm-up and we were ready for the challenge. And I remember we come out and we started so well. We got off to a flyer. And then we suddenly hit like a bit of a lull, and then France came back into it. And it was a really strange process. Like I remember like constantly having huddles and like talking on the run, weren't we?
Yeah.
And it was like, we score, they score, we score, they score. And it was like, and you look back and it was like, you're part of this crazy game. But I remember at the time just being like, we've got to find another try. And we'd find one, but then we were so focused on attacking that we kind of forgot at times to defend.
Yeah. I mean, my recollection of that game is significantly worse. And I'll tell you why, mate. It was my first Six Nations. And by the end of it, I was absolutely mentally fried. And then you add the Super Saturday to the mix. I was just like, please, let's just win this game by as many as we need and get out of here, because I was just knackered. But I remember, like you said, Len, we would score. We were making breaks from like 30 metres out from our try line and finishing them off as well. But then I remember the winger I was against that day, Noah Nakataki, I think his name is. He was on fire. Do you remember? Like, we kicked off and then he's made a 60-metre break, and I think they ended up scoring. Then we've kicked off again, or they've kicked off back to us, however it worked. And we've gone the length back. Like, it was just nuts, mate. It was so end to end, but I was absolutely fried. There was, like you said, so many permutations. My first Six Nations, huge game at the end. I was absolutely knackered, mate. So my memory is, I just remember Noah on fire, us scrambling to try and get points.
I just remember the crowd being so involved in it. It's because they knew as well, like everyone going into that. But that's the beauty of playing last. It's like the crowd were fully aware, so they're involved, and you're feeding off that energy and that atmosphere, and you're out there and you're playing with pace and you're moving the ball and you're scoring tries, and just everyone is so captivated by what's going on, of course. And then we finished the game, and I think we needed 5 more points, I think, and we'd have won the championship. And of course, Ireland would have been watching. I know for a fact, I remember speaking to Roy Best about it, is they'd beaten Scotland and they were watching, so they'd had their function and they're all sitting there waiting, watching. And we did this in 2021 when we won the title. 2020, sorry. We did this in 2020 when we won the title. And you're waiting around and you're like watching another team. We were the second game. France and Ireland playing last, and you're sitting there and you're kind of waiting. And it's the most bizarre feeling as you're trying to wait and see what happens. Now, also, Anne, I remember 2019, and again, this was slightly different because Wales were going for the Grand Slam, but they were playing Ireland in Wales, and they were the second game, and we were the last game against Scotland, which everyone remembers that draw, that crazy game. I think it was 38-38. We needed Ireland to go and win. At that point, I think Ireland were, certainly going into that tournament. They were number one in the world, weren't they? We beat them round one, and then they were going to Wales. So we were like, right, maybe Ireland can. They'd lost a bit of form, but we thought, right, maybe they can go do a job in Wales. And I remember watching that game again. Like, everyone's got their phones out, you're keeping track of the score and everything like that. And we remember going out for the warm up, and that game was still going on. And I was warming up for the Scotland game, and we're all getting ready, and we do the first half and we blow Scotland away, come in like a real comfortable lead. And then because you obviously have like guys that aren't involved, that are travelling or warm up but not, and then they're telling you like, oh no, Wales won, Wales were on the Grand Slam. And I remember like being at half time when we got told and being like, what? And it's like, yeah, Wales won the Grand Slam. And we're just like, we're up by like 20, 25 points maybe against Scotland. And everyone says about the second half, it was crazy. Well, like, I reckon, I swear to God, some of the reason was because we all got told that Wales won the Grand Slam. We came out half time thinking the job was done, and it was all a bit mental. Yeah. It's bizarre how Super Saturday work, and I don't think people really understand that you have pressures anyway, and then you add in other results and the permutations, and then having to do your job. It adds to the drama of it, and we feel it. Like, you feel the pressures, and you feel like the highs, and then all of a sudden, like, you're dominating Scotland. You come in half time, you've been told that Wales won the Grand Slam because you don't know the results yet, and it's like, oh man. And then it ended up in a mental game in the second half.
Yeah. No, I think that's human nature, isn't it? A bit, once the carrot at the end of the stick's gone, mate, some of your motivation dissipates, doesn't it? And midway through a game, you've got a lot less time to process it and figure out, right, how do I motivate myself for the rest of this game? Next thing you know, Finn Russell and Scotland are on fire. So, mate, no, I get it, and it all makes perfect sense.
It does. So what we're saying, and in short, is Ireland beat Italy. That ramps up the England-Wales game. England beat Wales. That ramps up. So France know, as they're turning up for their match, they're watching it on their phones, mate. They've seen that Ireland have won. They've seen England have won. And then they feel this little burden of, right, we've got to win. We can't afford to be off. So there we go. Let's see what happens.